We want to dive into something today that I think is really relevant for all aspects of life, personally and professionally. It's this whole idea of greatness. Kapil, you deal with it all the time. We were just talking about your kids and their ascension in golf. Hopefully, we can get into that a little bit today. But in framing this conversation about this pursuit of greatness or this continual pursuit of greatness, I'd like us to kind of start by agreeing on a definition of greatness, or ask you to tell me what greatness or excellence looks like.
It's a good question, but I don't think definitions go anywhere. All I will say is that it is arriving at some form or fashion of a pinnacle in one's profession.
And how do we know, like for example, like is a pinnacle in golf, is it winning a major or is it winning multiple majors? I mean, how would you define that pinnacle?
Yeah, that's undefinable. I mean, there are some players, some athletes who look at their role in professional sports as making a good living, and there are others who look at it as becoming a world number one. And so that's all very personal. There's nothing against the person who looks at it as making a living versus the world number one. That's just a function of how one thinks.
But do you really think that the person who's looking at it from the perspective of making a living, which, like you said, certainly I have respect for, but that is a completely different mindset than somebody who's trying to be the best at what they do or the best in the world at what they do? They're not the same people.
That's correct. It's a different form of DNA.
Let's talk about the latter. Let's talk about the person who wants to be the best in the world. Walk me through what it takes to get to that level.
I think first and foremost is a DNA which completely rejects one's own culture. I think the culture in society, in just regular society, the culture in sports, the culture in business, every domain, every discipline has its own culture. And that culture is composed of the prevailing beliefs, dogmas, notions, the traditional way and the status quo of the way that things are done. And I think that a person who has the DNA to completely walk against the grain because they harbor a deep-seated understanding that the masses and the majority and the status quo and the traditions are always wrong, and that they can only lead to a very limited outcome.
And I think anybody who has listened to any of our conversations, read any of your discourses, know that that is a place where you live. You're almost kind of this opposing perspective. And if we can break down this DNA for a moment, let's talk about what that DNA looks like. Certainly, I like to believe that the people who are going to listen and pay attention to our conversations are at least seeking that DNA. It's not something that we're all born with, right? It's something that we have to work towards. And a lot of people talk about, hey, being the best in the world a lot of times isn't fun because it requires rigor, self-discipline, and an enormous commitment that very few people want to make. Would you agree?
Yeah, but it isn't. You're going down the path of hard work. And I don't have much respect for hard work. I think hard work is largely a form of anxiety rather than a natural pursuit. I think hard work is sort of it's a middleman. It's an intermediary. I don't like middlemen. They don't go anywhere. Everything has to be from the horse's mouth to the horse's mouth. And hard work is this idea, well, if I put in the hours and if I do the quote work and if I follow the instruction and if I work day and night, and if I romantically make my hands bleed, and that will buy me something. And I don't think it does. Because I don't think there's a shortage of people who work hard and get nowhere. So I don't buy the idea of hard work being a reliable vehicle to anything, in the same way that I don't buy any intermediary as being a trustworthy and reliable vehicle to getting anywhere. I think everything arises spontaneously when the person has no choice but to, quote, make it. Then he might certainly, quote, put in the hours and certainly devote his life to it. And from an external point of view, as someone who is looking at that person, the person who's watching might say, oh, look, that person's working hard. But that person really isn't using hard work as a vehicle. It isn't like a degree, that if I get my degree, I'll get a job. It isn't like that. It's the hard work is secondary. The mania and the obsession and the possibility of not having it simply isn't acceptable. And I'll have to qualify what I just said, because some are going to hear that as positive thinking. And once again, when you reject everything, I have to keep putting disclaimers in, right? So, positive thinking is just nonsense, because the person who makes it knows he's going to make it. He doesn't positive think his way into it, because positive thinking relies upon hope. And the person who doesn't have a choice has no hope. It's just done. It's already done. And therefore, he carries out whatever needs to be done to make it a reality in the real world after it becomes a reality in his mind.
So when I look at myself in the mirror and I make a commitment to that person, staring at the person in the mirror.
Yeah, I don't like commitment. I don't like commitment, because commitment is forced. It's forced. Listen.
So how would you do?
If your boss says to you, okay, if you don't come into work tomorrow, I'm going to repossess your car, repossess your house, and I'm going to have you living in the street if you're not here by 9. I can promise you one thing: you are not going to need to make a commitment to be there at 9.
I will be there at 9. You're right.
Okay. So there's no commitment. That's more added steps. That's more of this academic jargon. Okay. It's irrelevant. There is no commitment. There's only desire. There's only a non-choice filled desire. The person who's going to make it is just going to make it. He knows it. He feels it. Like I said, everything is done before it is done. So I don't buy anything related to, if I do this, then I will get that. That's hope. That's commitment. That's discipline. I don't buy discipline either. Discipline is also an added extra. It is baggage. It's irrelevant. The person who is sufficiently desiring of it, he will have the discipline, but not the reverse. You can force yourself into a discipline, and you can have your nice morning routines and all that stuff, but that isn't natural. It's only when you reach a level of desperation that all those things fall in place for you. You don't pick them off one by one as some sort of intentional, conscious doing.
So what gets in the way then of the overwhelming majority of us not having the opportunity to achieve that level of greatness that we're talking about here? There has to be something that gets in the way, or a lot of things that get in the way.
Sure. And I'll tell you, one of the main things is belief. Human beings have a habit of subscribing to belief. And then they go down a positive thinking in the self-development route. And then they read books about how to change their beliefs, right? Make them more empowering and positive, and self-affirmations and self-talk and all this stuff. And you can't believe your way anywhere either. It's a knowing. So what gets in the way is belief. Belief is the costliest thing in a human being's life.
So what do you replace that with? Knowing? So do I know the unknown that, hey, I'm going to pursue this path?
You don't replace it with anything. You don't replace it with anything, okay? The knowing that's there wasn't placed there. It just was, okay? You don't replace it with anything. It is the understanding that if you believe the things that you are told, you will be massively and enormously limited. If you believe the stories that your mind tells you about yourself, you will be massively and enormously limited. So you ask questions too quickly, Mo. When you ask a question and then I respond, you immediately run away like the stove is too hot, and you jump to the other side and say, well, how do you fix that? You haven't heard me yet. You have to hear what I'm saying, not so that you can follow it, not so that you can do what I say. I'm not saying to do anything. It's listen with understanding, not listen with the opportunity to ask how. Because I'm never going to give it to you because it doesn't exist. So belief is a massive, massive problem, and the idea that one must change his beliefs is more imprisonment. So that's what gets in the way. What gets in the way, to be succinct, what gets in the way, it is that human beings are very quick to believe that what they hear, either from others or from their own mind, is true.
So who do we trust? If we're not going to trust anybody else's opinion or perspective, and not that people's opinions matter, but who do we trust?
That's a wonderful question. You trust the unnamed non-entity within you that speaks to you, and upon its speaking, you immediately know.
And what does that look like? Is that just an intuitive feeling?
Absolutely. Listen, it is not about what is there. It is about what is there after what needs to be removed is removed. So it is not about what is there, it's about what is left. So when a person subscribes to no belief, not by prescription, just genuinely, when he begins to doubt all the lies that his mind tell him, then the things that remain that have been trying to come to the surface but have not been able to because they've been drowned out by the belief, that thing is finally able to come to the surface. And that is an unnamed non-entity to which I will never give a name, because the moment I give a name to it, there will be a discussion about it. And as long as there's a discussion about it, it will not be seen.
So I'm curious, what kind of questions are you asking yourself every day about your own pursuit?
Well, that's a good question. What is it that I have not understood is the question that torments me about everything. I know for a fact, without a shadow of a doubt, that there are, as we sit here at this very moment, there are so many things that I just don't see yet. And even though I don't see them, I am a victim of them because of not seeing them. And that deeply bothers me.
And has there been something over the last month or so that you've seen that opened your eyes to something that you didn't know before about this whole seed of greatness?
And it's not about epiphanies, really. It's about constant refinement of understanding that in its aggregate results in epiphany as opposed to eureka and eureka moments, I think one thing that we've discussed before is the idea of self-sufficiency and independence, and arriving at the place where the inspiration arises from you for whatever reason, as opposed to being imposed upon you by society or by parents or by anyone else.
Well, one of the things that I'm learning about you that's deeply fascinating to me, that I want to seriously be very conscious of, I see you as someone who's constantly editing your life. And, people can take that for whatever it's worth, but you are constantly reinventing, refining, and so forth. What is it over the last couple of years that you have done to get away from perhaps some of those beliefs that you personally have had and start moving towards understanding where your own greatness lies?
I think it's just I think everything is qualitative, much more than quantitative. And I think qualitatively, what matures over time is not really skill, but sincerity. What matures over time is maturity. Your level of understanding matures. It grows deeper. It becomes more nuanced. It becomes bolstered. So it isn't from a 0 to 1. It may still be 1, but that 1 is a very different qualitative 1. So it is, one may know, for instance, that the story that their mind tells them are lies. Okay. He may have heard that. Okay. That means nothing. It does nothing just because someone heard it. They may have heard it 30 times. Still means nothing. But when that realization begins to hit, that is the qualitative difference. That is the maturity. That is the increased level of sincerity of that understanding. And so this is at once at odds with the manner in which society does things, which is that it views things from the standpoint of information. That a human being is an invalid who needs to be filled with information. Well, if a human being is an invalid, it isn't because he lacks information. It's that he doesn't understand the information on a visceral level. You can pack any amount of knowledge into a computer, but it is whether that knowledge gets into the bloodstream that it means anything. And neither is it about, well, people are told, but do they actually do? Well, that's nonsense too. There's no doing. Doing is all reactive. Doing is a camouflage that is carried out in order to hide the fact that one does not understand. So I would say that it is the quality of one's understanding that matures over time. It isn't necessarily the quantitative increase in the amount of knowledge that one sort of garners.
So what is the opposite of doing? If we're not doing, what are we doing? We're all trying to act in some way, shape, or form, right?
Yes. But everyone's trying to act for the same reason that you asked me how. Because understanding isn't perceived as being of very high value. This is a cosmetic, superficial society where Botox is the order of the day.
Well, no one's going to argue with that.
Okay, so that Botox pervades all facets of society. So if someone acts and they sweat and they bleed and they're out of breath, they can show the world and themselves that I did. And that's why they do it. It isn't to get anywhere. I think the idea of getting somewhere is less appealing to human beings than the idea of effort. Human beings measure themselves by effort, not by arrival. And it is for this reason that you have employers who reprimand employees who are efficient. Efficiency is very much a liability in the workforce. A person who's efficient and gets 7 hours of work done within 1 hour is considered lazy because he has 6 hours of left over. The person who can do it in 1 hour but takes 7 hours is considered hardworking because he worked all day. This is the world that we live in. It is not filled with highly intelligent people. It is filled with people who follow others. It is filled with sheep who do not think deeply, who are reactive, who are filled with the conditioning, and they carry out that conditioning in their daily lives without ever having examined what it is that they're actually doing. Another common example of this is the committees who are on the board of colleges and universities and so forth, who look at all the applications that come in, right, to see who they accept. Those committees are filled with people who are 60 and 70 years old. And they, at 60 and 70, have yet to come to the conclusion that one's grades and one's test scores have no bearing whatsoever on their potential,
sure,
their level of intelligence, or where they go in life. How can you get to be 60 or 70 years old and not come to that basic realization? I can understand that you're dumb when you're 20, but you shouldn't be stupid when you're 70. There should be a law against that. I mean, they say that with age comes wisdom. Well, obviously not.
So when you don't spend your days and your time during the course of those days doing anything, are you spending them in trying to understand? Is that where your head is? Is that a better term?
Yes, that's absolutely. That's where I live. Yeah. Whatever activity or whatever thing I may be involved in, I am wholeheartedly. I never leave it. I never leave the world of examining how the mind is influencing me and what is the truth and what is the lie. That's where I'm defaulted towards. That's what I have spent years reorienting myself towards, to where now it's automatic. That's just where the headlights shine immediately, is to discover that.
Well, you said something recently that really resonated with me, and I think it's very appropriate for one, this time of year, but two, for this conversation. And when you were talking about the secret to change, the secret to people changing, keeps us from experiencing these dramatic changes isn't that we don't want to change. It's that we're unfamiliar with who and how to be in this newfound state. And everybody's thinking about New Year's resolutions, and I'm going to be totally different and do great things next year. Explain this whole idea of what keeps us stuck isn't that we don't want to change. It's the fact that we're not familiar with this new who or how state that we're going to be in.
Yeah, I think you're referencing the Twitter message, and I'm shocked that I actually remember it.
I'm shocked too.
It was, yeah. I think comfort and familiarity is a very big deal. And when you live in a particular town, you know where the grocery store is, you know where the gas station is, right? You know where the flower shop is, you know where your work is, you know all the routes and the different back ways to get there in case there's traffic, right? You know everything, and it's on automatic pilot. There's a certain level of familiarity. Now, if you are dropped off into a new country, and suddenly you don't know where anything is, and it isn't just as simple as not knowing where the grocery store is. You're sort of out of your element. You're sort of wandering to see how things work in this new sort of place, and that is very that can produce a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty, and human beings like certainty. So, whether it comes to, personal development or, learning a new skill or whatever it is, human beings never stray too far from their competition, and they never stray too far from their current level of skill level. Because wherever you live, that town, the metaphor for that town is who you believe yourself to be,
Sure.
your set of skills, your physical characteristics, your beliefs. And so a person has developed an identity around those things, and those things are home. So in order to reach a new level of understanding that is significantly different than what one understands right now, or to arrive at a new place of fitness, or arrive at a massively different physical appearance, or whatever it may be, that requires a relearning of a completely new environment. And so one has to be comfortable with and or look forward to or embrace naturally, not prescriptively. I hate the word embrace. That new environment, that new town, that new city. And unless that is in place, one will never stray too far.
And where do you start?
A kid runs away from home, right?
That? Yeah, I mean, and I got a funny story to share about that. But like if you have somebody who's very serious and embraces what you're saying, how do I start to get comfortable with you?
Why did you pick up on embrace? I knew that you were going to pick up on that, even though I said I hated that word. You're going to use embrace, and then everyone in the audience is going to say embrace, embrace, embrace.
How do I immerse myself?
Okay. Embrace is not an action. It's a natural occurrence. It's like accept, right? I don't like that either, because accept is like forced acceptance. Nothing can be forced, all right? If it isn't already there, forget about it. It's useless. So what I would tell them is what I just told you. It is about It is about explaining to human beings how things work. What they do is up to them. Listen, the sky is blue. It's cold in the winter, right? Snow falls in Canada, all right? So those are the facts. Those are the truths, right? You can ignore them. You can procrastinate. You can stay where you are. It doesn't matter. Those are the truths. I'm never going to tell you which way to walk, because that's what you want me to do. Well, what's wrong with giving you what you want? Well, the reason that you want me to tell you that is because you don't really want to get there. So I'm not going to help you not get there. I don't care if you get there, but I'm not going to help you not get there. So it isn't about what you should do. I would tell them what I just told you, that in order for transformation or a massive change to occur, a level of comfort or looking forward to or enthusiasm of the new environment, which is completely foreign to that person, will require a new self-image, most likely. And unless that is in place, and meaning the desire for that is in place, they're never going to stray too far.
Are you constantly?
And no, I did not say that make sure that you enjoy the new place. Make sure that you make yourself look forward to anything. I said that is what is required. Not that you have to do it.
How often are you getting a new self-image of yourself?
Oh my God, are you kidding me? It isn't about a new self-image. It is complete annihilation of any self-image.
How often does that happen? Regularly?
It's not a numbers thing. It is a qualitative divorcing away from the belief in a self-image. It isn't, I did it 14 times this week and 17 times last week. That's meditation. I've done 20 minutes. How much did you do? Well, Sally did 14 minutes, and she's on her way up. Well, she saw that guy down the street who's a wonderful meditator, and his clothes are just wonderful, and the incense just smells fantastic. And he's up to an hour, so I'm going to make myself go to an hour. It isn't any of that nonsense. It isn't numbers. It isn't quantity. It's quality. It's visceral.
What makes success so difficult to repeat?
Meaning what? What do you mean by repeat?
And however, you look at athletics, it's easy to measure athletics. Very few teams ever win back-to-back titles, or Very few golfers ever win in the same year. That's why we marvel at people who win Grand Slams.
Yeah, those are okay. Okay, those are very interesting questions. Okay, and those are wonderful questions because I love to explore those questions. So in golf, it said that it's very difficult to follow up a low round with another low round. In golf, it's often said that, as you just said, that it's often the case that a person who is a young person on the tour who just got his tour card, if he wins once, he probably won't win for a very long time. Now, it's how you process that. So, well, no, but hang on, it's true. Okay, it's true, but you're too enthusiastic about it being true. Okay, okay. The reason that everyone jumps on that is because they are dying to express their preformed and prepackaged opinion as to why that is the case. And the reason that they are dying to express their preformed and prepackaged opinion is because they have an agenda. What is the agenda? The agenda is professional golf is hard. The agenda is not only is it hard, I need you to believe that it's massively hard because we have a brand, and that brand needs to be protected. So we will do all that we can to separate ourselves from the rest of society. So we must build it up. I don't blame them for building it up. It's marketing. Okay? But when you live in that room and you are constantly given that message, guess what you become? So we haven't seen the truth. We have only seen conditioned responses. So that the truth would only be known if you had two populations. One population continually heard the message, the Kool-Aid, the recycled air, and then the other population lived in a jungle. And they never heard the Kool-Aid, never drank the Kool-Aid and breathed the recycled air. Then you could say that even if the environment that lived in the jungle, so to speak, that was never exposed to the talking heads and the media and so forth, and the prevailing dogma, that if they produce the same results, then maybe there is something natural going on which might make that true. But you can't say that as long as there is an interference factor of the media and the recycled air and the Kool-Aid. You cannot say that is natural and that is not created and manufactured by propaganda.
It sells books and it sells eyeballs.
Sure. But the player himself doesn't really care about that. He's the one who really suffers, right? Back to our original statement when we first started today, it's buying into the culture. See, the person who rejects everything, who knows that everything out of everyone's mouth is a lie, that person's got a chance.
So I've never asked you this.
He suddenly becomes immune and no longer subject to the propaganda. And by the way, in order to address quickly the outraged, so to speak, they're going to come back with, well, you don't think golf is hard? You think the PGA Tour is easy? That's always the outraged questions, right? There's no interest in seeing the truth. They just want to, express outrage. And of course, golf is difficult. And of course, the PGA Tour is full of great players. But the results that are happening cannot be ascribed to natural human tendencies. They can be ascribed to interference by propaganda and the influence of a cultural environment as a petri dish in which the players live.
I was going to say I've never asked you this on the record, and I think it kind of bears a conversation because it's right around this whole idea of how do you repeat success. A decade ago, Tiger Woods was almost unbeatable, right? It seems like every time he would step up, on a Sunday round, he knew that he could win. What, in your eyes, as an outsider, even with insider information, what is the biggest difference between Tiger 10 years ago and the guy who's, doing everything he can to get back in the game today?
Well, back then, Tiger was Tiger.
What did you see there? What was Tiger?
Well,
what does it mean to be Tiger?
Well, it isn't what I saw; it's what he saw. Tiger was completely immersed in the persona that was created, and he rode that motivation and inspiration and momentum all the way. That character of Tiger Woods was the vehicle that took him to the top. When there is a chink in the armor, for whatever reason, self-doubt creeps in, and a person drops from immortality to becoming mortal. It's all in the mind. The Tiger's talent didn't go away. Sure, there was injuries, and that's obviously a factor. But Tiger knows how to play, and his understanding of how to play is superior to anyone in the game. How to play. Tiger understands the game better than everyone. That was a large reason for the wins. The other part of the wins was that, in my opinion, those who played against Tiger during his prime years felt the persona of Tiger too. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So they were out of their element because they felt like they needed to hit perfect shots. They forced the issue, and down the stretch, they sort of fell away, leaving. It goes back to what we said earlier, that it isn't what's there, it's what's left. And Tiger was, golf is largely a game of attrition. And Jack played the same way. Jack Nicklaus did the same thing. He was the last one standing. So Tiger plays very much in a Eastern Zen style of play, and so did Jack. And going back to the topic of greatness, I think that is a running thread amongst individuals who become great, is that they understand how things come to them. They don't force things and they don't chase things. They become attractors of things. And no, I didn't say anything about the law of attraction. They understand how the game works, and they try to achieve more by doing less. It is very, very much the opposite of the Western culture. Mm-hmm. It's very Eastern. You'll have Jason Day, for instance, ask Tiger Woods, Tiger, how is it that I win? And Tiger will give him sort of an abstract answer, and Jason will get upset and say, well, why can't you just tell me straight out? And that's exactly the point, is that there is no straight out. There's no recipe. It's the color of wind. It's feeling things between your fingers. It's nuance. It's touch and feel. It's sensitivity. It's art. It isn't science. It isn't method.
If somebody comes to you tomorrow, say a leader of an organization who's just had a record year in whether it's performance, their stock, whatever, and they come to you and they say, hey, heading into this next year, we're deathly afraid to not fall on our face. What can we do to keep this growth going? How do you respond?
Well, they're looking in the wrong place, and they're asking the wrong question. Anything that you do out of fear will fail.
What's a better question?
Fear is a great motivator. There's no doubt about it. But that motivation is best spent examining the holes in one's game as opposed to trying to improve one's game. Because if you remove the holes, greatness happens by itself. So it really becomes, once again, there are no business problems, right? There are only human problems. So the game begins. The game is to understand the game within the game. So it is to understand, what is it that I do not understand? Where are the deficiencies in my 360-degree understanding of my business, and how could I understand it better? What are the beliefs that I have that are causing me problems? It is those qualitative questions, as opposed to an alarmist sort of, I need to know what to do in order to get a certain. It's none of that. That's very common thinking. That isn't greatness. Greatness is very soft and very deep and very nuanced and very incisive. It is an examination. It is a desire to know, as opposed to a compulsion to do.
There's a phrase that you hear a lot whenever you talk about high achievers or human performance. When people talk a lot about even athletes themselves or business leaders, you gotta love the process. You gotta love the process. It's hard work. Trust the process. How do you feel about that?
The idea is valid. The delivery is not.
Help reframe it for me.
Well, it's how it's going to be heard. It's kind of like the 10,000 hours thing, right? So, I exchanged some very respectful emails with Anders Ericsson at Florida State. At least he was at Florida State. I'm not sure where he is now. A number of years ago, regarding the 10,000 hour rule and Gladwell's popularization of it through outliers. And I said, the problem with the 10,000 hour rule, regardless of whether it's valid or not, let's forget about that. Okay. The problem is that the effect it's going to have is going to be counterproductive, because people are going to hear the 10,000 hour rule, and since we live in a how-to society, and people are looking for what to do next, and how to this, and 5 steps to this, and list post this, and nonsense upon nonsense, they are going to use that and swallow it up as the how-to. They're going to take out their clocks, and they're going to start measuring hours, which is what is happening. And nobody who becomes great measures the hours, and once the alarm bell goes off, the 10,000 hours are up, I'm great. That's silly. That's fantasy. So it must be understood, Mo, that in many ways, whenever you speak, you lie. Because truth is very difficult to capture in words, and most importantly, the person who is hearing the truth must be of a sufficient level of evolution to be exposed to it. Otherwise, they will naturally react with outrage and how-to, and will not benefit from it at all. So telling someone that you got to love the process, we're back to sort of, you got to love being uncomfortable in the new city once you become so highly self-developed. It's not about that. It may in the end be that. That's fine. That may be a truth, but it certainly can't be the vehicle. Because why? Because people will then say, I must learn to love the process. And that will be fake. They will grit their teeth and try to love the process. That's nonsense. It is not genuine. And anything that is not genuine, natural, falls flat. You can grit your teeth today, and you can grit your teeth next week, but eventually, either you're going to open your mouth, or your teeth are going to crumble. One of those two things is going to happen, because it wasn't natural, it was forced.
Do you see a correlation between the connection of someone's spiritual core and their level of success?
More specific.
If I am really working hard to understand the core of my existence, am I working towards this pursuit of greatness? Am I going to start to see, the closer that I get to understanding my own truth, is that path going to be a little bit clearer for me?
I think it will, but it has to be. Once again, I mean, one could view that and say, well, as long as I'm looking for the truth in myself, that everything will take care of itself, and that'll become an intermediary of its own. So there has to be a level of practicality that is pursued in the specific domain in which one is working. So nothing is that clean.
So let's put the domain. Let's keep it in business, right? Mm-hmm. Very few business people, very few leaders in companies are going to talk about the truth in the manner that you talk about. They're not going to talk about it. It's not happening in boardrooms, right? So what is it that we can start to understand better about the correlation between one's understanding of him or herself and their ultimate output or success?
Mm-hmm. To understand that everything begins and ends with the human mind. That all of your problems that exist and all of the ways that exist to great success and to greatness all exist within the mind and not in methodology. It does not exist in the world of activity or action or strategy or business ideas or business development or 7 ways of following people who are a success or buying business books. It is once again, we've come full circle, is a complete rejection of the idea of status quo. It is a person has to have that DNA to totally reject the status quo.
All right, 2 more things for you. All right, I want to talk a little bit about adversity. That's one of the things that often comes up again when you talk about sustained excellence, is that all of us have to deal with it. And the ones who are able to get past whatever adversities they're dealing with have a better opportunity to experience that sustained excellence. What is the method, if there is a method, for you to think about adversity? When something out of the ordinary happens, what do you do to start thinking about it?
To understand where it came from. To understand the laxness, to understand the holes in one's understanding and what that situation represents, as opposed to what to do about it. One has to understand that reflexively jumping to a solution will create more and more problems. And that is a very foreign construct. That is a very out of the world sort of idea that is different from traditional society and business, because everyone looks for solutions. The thing is, the solution to any problem is hidden. And it's hidden in the most ingenious of places, which is in the very deep center of the problem. So the only person who finds it is the person who understands the problem. But nobody wants to look at the problem. They want a fix to the problem. And when you seek fixes to problems, you go on an endless goose chase for more and more fixes. And thus, you get more and more problems.
Are there a question or 2 that you ask yourself when something like that happens?
What is the gap in understanding about knowing that one must look at the problem and not seek a solution? How can that be misunderstood? Why does an extra question have to be added?
Because people want to know. Like you said, we live in a solution.
If they want to know, then I just told them what to know.
You know, which leads me to, I want to ask you this last question because it came directly from as a result of our last conversation. Our last conversation was on parenting, but I don't think this question is as much related to that. But it's about the idea of patience. Several people asked me to get your insight on patience. You know, people who listen to you know that you're not a very patient person, right? It's kind of this whole idea of trust the process. No, you want to get to the result. Give me your thoughts on patient. Are you a patient person?
No, absolutely not. Patience is one of those, things that echoes across the halls of the ivory towers. It has nothing to do with practicality in the real world. Patience is like compromise. It's fine to be patient and compromise on the things that you don't really care about. But things that you really want, why would you be patient?
But don't they take time? Doesn't this level of greatness that we're talking about take? I'm not going to, look at myself in the mirror, get to that level of desire that you're talking about today.
Okay.
And
okay, why not? Why not? Why not? Listen, this is the problem with human life. It's just too long. The question that you asked me just now, you wouldn't be asking me if our lifespan was 35 years old. You wouldn't be asking me this question. You asked me this question because our lifespan is, 80 years old. So therefore, we got 50 more years to waste. Patience, compromise, they don't have any place in things that are significant. If things take time, that's nature's business. It's not your business, right? So if you sit and you wait because you're trying to be patient, right? My question is, how do you know how long to wait?
You don't.
Okay, so then that means you just be patient your whole life?
Or you can quit.
Might as well. You've already quit if you're patient.
That's what I appreciate so much about you, man. And when I got asked that question, it was very interesting, and I knew the response. But again, it's very counterintuitive to what you hear about patience in developing people, patience in, you take golf, for example. You're not going to go out there and win your first tournament, right? But you got to trust the process and you got to keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I don't believe in faith. I believe in what I see before me. I trust nothing. Okay? The idea of, one day it'll come. What if it doesn't come? Do I get my years back?
Not yet. Maybe in the future with AI, but not yet.
Well, the thing about belief is that you better be right. Because if you're wrong in your beliefs, the years that you spend are going to be mighty costly to you. Because they're never coming back. So no, I don't. Patience has a very.
It's not a virtue for you.
No, absolutely not. Urgency is a virtue. Now is a virtue. If your house is burning down, you're not patient, are you? Right? Patience, it's for things that you don't care about. The things that you really want, you want them now. You're urgent. You'll do whatever you have to do, and you'll work all night long. But the last thing you'll do is sit at the table and say, "I'm going to be patient, and I'm going to trust the process and have faith that one day it'll come." What if it doesn't? Who are you going to blame? Because the same person who told you to be patient and one day it'll come and have faith, what's he going to do for you if it doesn't work out? What can he do besides say, "I'm sorry"? So the lack of understanding, ignorance has consequences.
When was the last time someone really impressed you?
Well, I can tell you people who I'm inspired by. The greatest source of inspiration in my life was Buddha. And I don't give 2 cents about what he said. Couldn't care less. I don't want to hear it. Right? It was okay. So, speaking of, speaking of this, I think recently I put up on Twitter that the middle is the worst place to be.
But yet a lot of people attribute the Buddha to saying the middle.
Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you this. So the middle is moderation, right? Right?
That's harmony. That's where they say that's where all harmony is.
Okay. So let's, once again, don't have any faith. You speak English, I speak English. We can understand basic concepts, right? So Buddha said that I will sit under this tree and I will sit on this spot and my bones may break and my skin may wither, but I will not rise from this spot until I reach enlightenment. So whose moderation is that?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay? So moderation is nonsense. Okay? The middle way, once again, it's a dumbing down for the masses. It's how a person who is willing to sit in one spot until he dies, that's the middle way? That's balance? And speaking of patience, drank his own urine, emaciated, his body on the verge of death because he wanted to get to enlightenment. Is that patience? Nothing about the Buddha is patient or middle way. Once again, I don't care what he says. I don't even believe that what he said is what he said, unless what the things that he did coincide with that. That I buy because it makes perfect sense, because that's the way things usually work. Things work by way of urgency and intensity and by way of a fire, not by way of a trickle. It doesn't work that way. So, yeah, people like to believe things because they sound nice and they fit into their nice, orderly, organized framework that you can teach in classrooms and then ask multiple choice questions about. Okay? That's the world. It has nothing to do with reality. Because if that was reality, then you could basically teach everyone to be great by following a prescription.
Wouldn't that be cool?
No, it wouldn't. Absolutely
Trick
not.
Question.
Absolutely not. Nothing great happens by way of democracy. Meritocracy is far more valuable to human beings. One of the greatest advantages that a person with driven DNA has is that he knows that the rest of the human beings are not going to be equally driven.
Yeah, very true.
Why would you remove that inborn advantage?
Fascinating stuff, my man. Why don't we leave everyone with an important question that you would ask them to ask themselves between now and our next conversation? Is there one question that for people?
I'll just leave them with the question that I always ask myself, because it is the driving force behind my life. And that is, what is it that I do not understand? And I don't recommend that anybody ask it, because if they do, it'll be done mechanically.
So how the hell do we approach it?
Whatever seeps into your bones without your permission has already seeped into your bones. There is nothing intellectually or consciously that needs to be done.
Let it be, right?